Welcome back to She Coaches Coaches. I'm your host, Candy Motzek, and this is episode 4 in our special series, Build Your Business Like a Coach. Over the last 3 episodes, we've talked about creating consistent clients, why traditional marketing feels so uncomfortable for thoughtful coaches, and why standing out isn't about becoming louder, it's about discovering something worth sharing. So today, let's talk about something a little bit more personal, confidence, or more accurately, the confidence we all wish we had. So have you ever noticed how some coaches speak with a quiet confidence? They're not loud or trying to impress anyone. They're not constantly reminding people about how qualified they are. They simply sound certain, not arrogant, just certain. Now, for years, I assumed that those coaches had something that I didn't. Maybe they'd been coaching longer, had another certification. Maybe they were just naturally more confident people. But over the years, something completely changed my mind. I don't think confidence comes first. I think it's the result. That's the thing that you're after. Not the kind of authority that you put on your website, not the kind that you announce on your LinkedIn headline, the kind that you earn. You take action, you learn something real, and you grow your confidence. One of the biggest myths is that confidence comes from believing in yourself. Now, don't get me wrong. Believing in yourself does matter, but we've all seen those mediocre performers. You know what? The ones with the bulletproof confidence, the ones that it's completely unfounded, yet they think so highly of themselves. So it's not just believing in themselves. Now, if you've ever struggled with confidence or imposter syndrome, you already know something. You can't simply think your way out of it. You can't just wake up one morning and decide, that's it. Today I'm confident and I'm going to be confident forevermore. It just doesn't work like that. Confidence needs something to stand on. Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking. Suddenly, something happens and that little voice appears in the back of your brain. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just another coach saying the same things as everyone else. Now, if you've ever thought like that, I want you to know you're not alone. You're in good company. Almost every thoughtful coach that I have ever worked with has experienced that feeling too. Not because they weren't great coaches, but because they cared. They care deeply about getting it right. One of the things that I love about coaching is that we are lifelong learners. We read books, we listen to podcasts, we take courses, certifications, we go to conferences. But somewhere along the way, I learned something. Another certification wasn't going to miraculously make me feel more confident. The question wasn't, how can I know more? The question was, how can I trust what I already know? Those are very different questions. A few years ago, I found myself hesitating more than I'd like to admit. I'd write a post and I'd wonder if I'd said anything worthwhile. I'd record a podcast episode and then say, I'm sure somebody has already talked about this. Maybe then I'd second guess my own ideas. Not because I didn't know coaching, but because I wondered whether my perspective really mattered. I looked back now and I don't think it was just a lack of confidence. I think that I found that I had a lack of evidence, that there wasn't enough underneath my ideas. There wasn't enough sitting on them. There wasn't enough foundational things underneath my ideas. I needed something solid to stand on. And I just didn't know it yet. This is exactly what happened with one of my clients. She's an anesthesiologist. She coaches female physicians. Now think about that for a minute. She's highly accomplished, very well educated, deeply experienced. Now, if anybody was going to feel confident, it was her, right? And yet, when we were talking about her growing her coaching business, she admitted something that kind of surprised me. She worried about sounding salesy. She worried that she might look like she was going to try and convince somebody. She worried that she might sound like every other coach and that there was nothing that she could really build her authority on. Maybe you felt that way too. Not because you doubt that you're meant to be a coach, because you don't want to make claims that you can't stand behind. That is not insecurity. That is integrity. So instead of just trying to do the wishful thinking and become more confident, she became more curious. She ran a survey with women she most wanted to help. She asked them questions. She listened to the answers. She noticed the patterns and got really fascinated with what she was hearing. Those questions eventually became a white paper, then a masterclass, and something more important happened, changed. Not because she magically felt more confident, but because she became more certain. And there's a big difference. Confidence often gets talked about like a personality trait. And so some people are just born with it, but I don't believe that's true. I think confidence grows when you have enough evidence to trust yourself and you've taken the action to build it. And that is exactly what happened. She stopped relying on other people's assumptions. She wasn't borrowing ideas from somebody else's book. She wasn't repeating advice that she'd heard at a conference. She was listening, really listening. She was collecting data, patterns, language, and little by little, she built something solid. Then she said this to me. She said, I used to hold back because I was afraid of coming across in a salesy way. But now I have data that I gathered myself to back everything up. So when someone says to me, I just feel like I'm going through the motions, I can say, you're not alone, and I can prove it. And this changes everything about how I show up for my business. So when I think about that conversation, these 5 words are the ones that really stuck out for me. And I can prove it. Notice what happened. She didn't have to try and convince anyone. She didn't have to wishful thinking her way into confidence. She wasn't becoming more charismatic. She has something real to stand on. That is very different. Now, about the same time, something similar was happening for me. When I completed the Coaching Business Growth Survey, people started asking me different questions. So instead of saying, Candy, what kind of a coach are you? They began asking, Candy, what are coaches telling you? Think about that shift. The conversation was no longer about me. It was about what I had discovered. And that takes an enormous pressure off. I didn't feel like I had to prove that I was an expert. I simply shared what I was learning. And then something even more interesting happened. People leaned in, not because I was louder, but because they were curious. And this mattered to them. One of the biggest discoveries from my survey was that nearly 70 of the coaches who responded had 5 or fewer clients. That finding surprised me. Now, somebody might say, well, maybe they didn't want a ton of clients, but that finding of 70% with 5 or fewer clients was coupled with another finding that said their most pressing goal for the next 12 months was more revenue, more clients, and more consistent clients. These were coaches who had coaching skills. They had experience. They had life experience. They had credentials. Most of them had advanced education, MBAs, masters, physicians, all kinds of people who have a long list of credentials. So the question became, why? And as I kept looking at the data, another pattern started to show up. Those who consistently had clients weren't just creating more content. They weren't using paid ads. What they were doing was building relationships. They were having more conversations, and this created more referrals, more collaboration opportunities, more speaking opportunities. They got to be known in their community. This discovery confirmed something that I've been sensing for years. Clients don't come from content alone. They come from trust, and trust grows through meaningful conversations. That single insight has shaped everything that I teach today. And this is one of the reasons I believe that thoughtful coaches struggle with traditional marketing approaches. They're trying to create trust by broadcasting, but trust doesn't usually grow that way. Trust grows when people feel heard and seen and understood, when they believe that you see them, when they hear you describe a challenge that they've never quite been able to put into words. That's what I discovered, and I want that for you too. Here's something that I hear all the time. Candy, I just need more confidence. Well, maybe that's true, but I'd like to offer another possibility and perspective. Maybe you don't need confidence first. Maybe what you need is evidence that you've listened, evidence that you've asked the questions, evidence that you've paid attention, and that you've learned something that your dream clients want to hear. Because confidence can be built on action, courage, and evidence, and it feels very different from confidence built on wishful thinking. I think that this is especially important for thoughtful coaches, people who are midlife, who have had success in their life. Maybe they're engineers or corporate leaders or HR professionals or marketing professionals, the people who care deeply about doing excellent work. They're not looking for shortcuts. They're looking for substance, something they can believe in, something that feels authentic. And I think that's exactly what the consistent client method creates. Not fake confidence, grounded confidence, centered confidence, not borrowed authority, but earned authority. And those are the kind of businesses that last. So let me leave you with one question. What evidence are you collecting? Notice that I'm not asking you what content are you creating, not what is your niche, but what evidence are you collecting? What evidence are you gathering that is going to help you understand your dream clients even more deeply than you did last month? Because every meaningful conversation becomes another layer in the foundation of your authority. One day you're going to look back and you're going to realize you didn't wake up and suddenly feel confident. You simply became somebody who had something worth saying. Next week, we're going to explore something that is changing every profession, including coaching. It's the topic of the year, artificial intelligence. And here's the question we're going to look at. In a world where anyone can create content in seconds, what becomes even more valuable? And I think the answer is going to surprise you. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, I would love to send you my free Authority Lab case study. It walks you through how one simple project became the foundation for my podcast, my speaking, my messaging, my programs, and a steady stream of consistent client conversations. I think you'll see exactly why I believe authority isn't something that you just claim. It's something that you build. You're going to find the link in the show notes. And until next time, keep asking those great questions, because the best coaching businesses aren't built by shouting louder. They are built one meaningful conversation at a time.